maintain it with little to no effort and never diet again? If that's a yes, then this podcast is for you. Welcome to The Perfect Gauge. I'm your host, Caroline Tricky, dietitian and eating psychology coach, and I'm so thrilled you've joined me. Do you have a voice inside your head that tells you to give up, that you'll never lose weight because you've tried so many times before and it didn't work then? So what makes you think it's going to work for you now? It may just be one voice or a couple of voices, which I've heard referred to as the committee. And they appear every time you're about to step out of your comfort zone and try something new, something you're excited about and really, really want, like changing your eating habits and potentially dropping some weight. And before you know what's happening, they're saying things like, well, you just can't be trusted. What were you thinking? Left to your own devices, you'll devour everything in sight. You need to be restricted. You need to be controlled. They say, you're hopeless. They say, other people might be able to do this, but not you. You can't. What are you doing? What are you thinking? And when all of that is happening inside your head, it can feel pretty intense. And all you want is for it to quieten down and go away. And the only way you know how to do that is by giving up. So you do. You stop trying to do the new thing. You go back to your old habits, and when you do, you get this immediate relief because that noise goes away. But then what happens? Well, you're back in your so-called comfort zone, except that only a short while later you remember that actually your comfort zone isn't that comfortable. That's why you wanted out before, and you want out again. So what do you do? Well, I'm so glad you asked, because there's actually plenty you can do, starting with understanding what's actually going on. You see, believe it or not, that voice inside your head is actually there to help you. Seems ridiculous, I know, as it can be really loud and really mean and sound more like a bully than a friend or confidant. But it's actually trying to protect you. It's trying to keep you safe. It's not being mean for the sake of being mean. It just doesn't know any other way. You see, many, many years ago, our ancestors needed to stay safe with what they knew, as changing things could have been catastrophic. The world we live in now is pretty safe compared to how it was back then. Hard to imagine, I know. But this survival instinct is still behaving like we live in caves and are constantly in real and present danger. It doesn't want us kicked out of the tribe, as once upon a time being alone on the savannah meant you were exposed and could be eaten by saber-toothed tigers or cannibals or starve. Okay, so I might have mixed up my historic metaphors quite a bit, but I'm hoping you get the general gist, which is we all have an inner critic, or what I refer to as your inner mean girl. It's a safety mechanism, a survival instinct there to stop you. She's there to stop you from doing anything new or different or out of the ordinary. She wants you to keep doing the same thing over and over, because she sees any change as risky, a life or death situation. And while most of the time these days change doesn't mean you're in harm's way, she hasn't caught up with the program and is still prone to overreacting. And let's face it, this response is still pretty helpful if you happen to come across a bear that starts to chase you, right? It's just not so helpful at work, at home, and in other bear-free zones. A major function of your brain is to preserve the status quo. If you're alive right now, whatever you're doing must be working, so keep doing it. But we're talking about losing weight, It's not like you're about to jump off a building where things can permanently change for you, and not in a good way. But to the brain, change is change, and any change is risky. So it resists. And that's why your inner mean girl is so mean. She's using everything in her power to stop you from changing. She preys on your insecurities, fears, and concerns. She knows just how to press your buttons. She certainly knows how to press my buttons. She knows how to get a reaction. She knows how to get you to stop. If you feel at all unsure of yourself, it's easy to get sucked into listening to and believing that inner mean girl with all her harsh judgments and all her harsh criticisms. And we kind of go along with it, at least at first, because so many of us think that criticism is actually good for us, that we need it, that it keeps us on track, even though it actually does the exact opposite. In fact, it's a very slippery slope and one we can slide down far too easily. I know I certainly have many a time. I know this only too well. For too many years, I let my inner mean girl run the show and call the shots. I let her criticize, judge, and boss me around because I didn't realize she wasn't me. I thought we were one and the same. I identified with her and couldn't tell my own voice from hers. I really thought that voice was my voice, and it was simply stating the truth, that somehow it ultimately knew the truth about me and what I was capable of. Or should I say, how I actually wasn't capable of doing anything, because she'd always find evidence to prove her theory that I couldn't. She knew the right comments to make to push my buttons. And when I heard that harsh voice, I'd immediately surrender. I'd agree with her. I'd give up. I'd believe it wasn't possible, that I'd failed in the past and that's all I was capable of doing in the future too. Luckily, I discovered the truth about this inner voice. And when I understood why she was there, I was able to separate her from me, turn the volume down, and stop taking her comments so personally. When it comes to changing anything, resistance is a natural part of the process. Nobody escapes resistance. It's kind of like gravity. So you've got to learn to deal with it, because if you don't, you're screwed. Do you have an inner mean girl who stays quiet until you decide to do something different? Something out of the ordinary? If you do, when your inner mean girl appears, start to notice what it is that she says. Notice the words she's saying and the tone she uses. Because this is what makes change hard. This is what keeps you stuck in the past, destroys your motivation. This is what makes you feel small and incapable. And often wanting to eat so she'll quieten down and you'll feel better. When you start to notice her, you can start to separate yourself from this voice, start to observe it. The simple act of being able to observe this voice lets you know it's not you. Then start to notice if this voice reminds you of anyone, if it even sounds like someone you know. Eckhart Tolle says, "You have a mind, but you are not your mind." When I first started doing this work, noticing what my inner mean girl was saying, I found it super helpful to remind myself that this voice is just my brain making shit up in an attempt to stop me from changing. The other thing you need to know about your inner mean girl is that she lies. That's right, your inner mean girl is a liar. She tells you big, fat, juicy lies. In fact, she often sneaks under the radar, as she'll start off by saying something truthful. So let's say the first 10% of what she says can be the truth. And then before you know it, she takes you out at the knees as she follows through with a doozy, as she attaches a big fat lie to the end. So let's say after a long day, you go sit down on the couch, relax and watch TV when you notice a craving for chocolate. And even though you told yourself earlier that you weren't going to have any, you decide to just have 2 squares and that you'll eat them slowly and mindfully. So you get the chocolate and you eat it. Then before you know it, your inner mean girl starts up with, "Wow, you just can't be trusted. You said you weren't going to have any chocolate, but you did. You're so hopeless. You always mess up. You'll never lose this weight. You may as well go ahead and eat the rest of the block." This actually happened to one of my clients recently. Let's call her Jenny. But since we'd been talking about her inner mean girl in our latest session, she was able to notice what was happening and didn't fall into the trap. She didn't fall down that slippery slope she's been down many times before. In particular, we'd been talking about how the inner mean girl tends to be overly critical or dramatic and loves to catastrophize. 2 of her favourite words are always and never, which just proves how much she lies since she can't predict the future. Nobody can. So she can't know if you will always mess up or never lose weight. Unless your mean girl, inner mean girl, has a crystal ball, she, like the rest of us, doesn't have any clue as to what's going to happen in the future. What Jenny used to do was to try and justify herself to her inner mean girl, or she'd get into an argument with her. But if you get into an argument with your inner mean girl or tell her to go away, she just gets louder and digs her heels in. She's not going to go anywhere. Because whatever you resist persists and grows stronger. So trying to tell her to be quiet or go away doesn't work. Writer Anne Lamott describes listening to your inner mean girl as being tuned into radio station KFKD, purposely pronounced K-fucked. She warns that it is a huge obstacle for writers, but as we know and have discussed, it's a huge obstacle for anyone, including those wanting to lose weight, especially former dieters. Anne Lamott says the best way to get quiet, other than the combination of extensive therapy, Prozac and a lobotomy, is first to notice that the station is on. So notice when your inner mean girl is there. Now it's actually not a bad idea to listen to what she says, at least at first. Perhaps there is something she wants to alert you about. There may be something you need to know. But once she's said her piece, if there's nothing of value in what she has to say, you can then be done with her and you can change the radio station. Or you can do what I like to do, which is to turn the volume on the hypothetical radio station down, right down. Tony Robbins talks about how we need certainty, how it's one of the 6 core human needs. The need to feel safe, comfortable, secure, stable, protected, and the need to have predictability in our lives. And of course, change shakes that up and the brain starts to fear the unknown. This is one reason why the inner mean girl is there. But the truth is, certainty is an illusion. Unless you're some sort of psychic, and if you were, you wouldn't be listening to this. Nobody knows what's going to happen in the future. Your brain thinks it's safer doing the same thing over and over, but it still doesn't know what's ultimately going to happen. Every day I see clients who have diagnoses they never saw coming. So you see how we have a tendency to get in our own way and stop ourselves when we don't even need to, since none of us know what's going to happen. What I want you to do now is I want you to imagine what will happen if you don't change. What will happen if you keep doing things the way you are? What's going to happen over the next 12 months, going by what's happened over the past 12 months? If things stay the same, what's likely to happen if you carry on with the same behaviour, doing the same things? I want you to think really truthfully. So just get a reality check on what will happen if you take no action. Okay, now we're going to do things the other way around. I want you to think about what might happen if you did start doing things differently. If you were able to change and be consistent with that change, what could potentially happen in the future? What could that result be? Let's try it on and see if it feels right, because if it doesn't, you won't ever take action. Let's say you're able to put into place all that I've discussed in all the previous 9 episodes of this podcast so far. So if you stop dieting, you drop the rules and start listening to your body. If you're able to really tune into your body's signals and start allowing it to tell you when, what, and how much to eat. No more spending hours in your head thinking about what you should eat, what you could eat, what you might eat, and what you just ate. You are now able to eat what your body is asking for, and knowing when you've had enough and wanting to stop before you overeat. See yourself feeling calm and relaxed around food and thoroughly enjoying the eating experience. Because one way I know to really quieten down the inner critic is to create a vision for the future, one so compelling that it pulls you towards it. A vision that is so exciting to you, so connected to your heart, so meaningful that it literally pulls you ahead. You see, your brain can't tell the difference between what's real and what you imagine, between real life experiences and ones you create by thought alone and play out in the theatre of your mind. So if you can imagine the changes you'd like to make and the impact that they could have on your life, your brain will help you create it. If you can see it and you believe it, you will achieve it. Your inner mean girl will get on board and will quieten right down. Try it and see for yourself. And if you need help with any of this, get in touch. There's a link in the show notes. Okay, so that's what I have for you today. Start to observe your inner mean girl and start to separate yourself from what she says. Stop taking it so personally. And remember, you can always turn the volume right down. And then please join me next week when I discuss what you believe you're capable of. Have a great week, and I'll speak with you then. Oh, and quickly before you go, I've just launched a 5-day Eat Consciously free challenge on my website that can help you become a more conscious eater. And yes, it's free. Go to carolinetricky.com. That's tricky with an EY to sign up.